Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. I'm sorry that I haven't been doing any new videos for a while now, but I have been kind of busy with university and some personal projects, so I haven't really had the time or the will to do them, and now I decided to do another one. And I might have some pretty exciting news to share in the near future, we'll see. Anyway, today I'm bringing you a video with CN playing against Theodosius, and I'm going to be analyzing CN's play as OSTHEER and as Soviets. This game was played this weekend, I'm pretty sure, yeah. And he's up against Theodosius, who isn't a bad player by any means, he's actually a good player. So he isn't a pushover, it isn't easy to defeat him. So it's going to be a good game, or two good games, to show how CN plays as both sides, and we are going to be analyzing, and hopefully you guys can learn something from the way he plays. Okay, so I'm also going to be playing at 2 times the speed, because there is no reason not to. Very usual start with the MG and the Grenadier. And also, we are going to see how he plays with his units. So, one thing that you'll notice with top players is that they are very good at gathering information from where the opponent is. This Pioneer is one of the best tools you have as OSTHEER to scout for where your opponent is. So you'll notice right away that he splits off his Pioneer from his main line infantry units. And the only reason he does this, obviously, besides capping the easy manpower points, who are very fast to capture, is to see where the riflemen from Theodosius are going. So you'll notice that he comes here and he checks out if he sees any riflemen. And he doesn't, and the rifleman is actually in this side. So he gets here 2 free manpower points, and he does get to see where the second rifleman is. And because of that, he knows that these territories on this side of the map are totally free to capture. That's the power of gathering this kind of information early on. As a side note, before I mention capturing the manpower points, it's something that I think medium level players don't actually notice, but these manpower points can be more powerful than the, heavy income fuel points. Just because the time that you take to capture each of these is a very small amount compared to this one, and they actually also give munitions. So 2 of these points are basically equal to 1 of these high fuel points. Capturing them is going to be better than 1 of these. So you'll notice a lot of times top players will kind of do their capping order around capturing the manpower points that give you both fuel and munitions and are very quick to capture, and also position themselves in a way that they can see where the opponent is going, right? So this is very important, and you see that straight away from CN here. And he knows that in this side, the rear echelon is the only unit that he might have. Here yet again, he enters the building, he sees if the rifleman is following him, and he quickly goes into the cutoff to be annoying, right? One thing to notice as well is that he knows that this rifleman is on this side of the map, and 1 rifleman will win against 1 grenadier squad. What you'll notice is that because of that, he will use this grenadier as more of a stalling unit than to win the engagement. So he'll back off into green cover, and right now, if Theodosius wants to go in, he actually might lose the engagement because he has to go all this way without any cover to close the distance on the Grenadier who's in green cover. And even if he does win the engagement, he'll drop a lot of models. So this Grenadier isn't really trying to win this side here, he's just trying to buy time because 1 Grenadier isn't going to win against 1 Rifleman most of the time. But apart from that, CN also is very aggressive right from the bat. He knows that he made 1 rifleman retreat, and it was this one, and he took the opportunity right away. When he saw that his rifleman wasn't going to come over to this right side, he immediately went for the cutoff. And because he has the MG nearby, it's going to be very hard for THEODOSIUS to gain this cutoff back in an easy way. And what you'll notice is that top players do this a lot, where as soon as they get a small advantage, like they just need one unit to retreat, and they'll use that to go straight to the cutoff, which is all you need to do in this game to kind of push back their tech. And when you are up against USF as OSTHEER, your objective is kind of to delay that steward timing, and get that to have more time to give some pain to the USF troops. So right away, CN is in a very good position, and you'll notice that he backs off the Pioneer because he already knows that this side, this rifleman is controlled. His only worry is if he's going to get flanked, so he was trying to go for this building. The rifleman got there first, and the reason that he's leaving the Pioneer here is that he doesn't want the rifleman to flank the MG. So if the rifleman does leave the building, he'll receive a lot of damage close range from the Pioneer. Here we see that he's still stalling the rifleman. THEODOSIUS is trying to get his cutoff back, and he'll now try and get a second grenadier around to fend off that rifleman. You'll also notice that he doesn't... I feel like a lot of medium level players would have hard retreated the MG here, but one thing that you will notice that top level players do a lot is that they know their limits, and they know that if this rifleman wanted to get the MG to hard retreat, he will need to chase it. And if he chased the MG and was focusing the models of the MG, that's all the Grenadier here needs to then win the engagement. So let's say that THEODOSIUS started to chase the MG to get it back to base. After he was done doing that, this Grenadier would have done enough damage in the meantime to actually win the engagement afterwards. So that's kind of the strategy that a lot of high-level players do. You'll notice that they know very well how to keep their units in the field as long as they can. Flamethrower upgrade, very standard, especially against USF that by default doesn't have any mines. Now we see the lieutenant, so CN is probably thinking now, okay, I see the lieutenant, but I do know that I did a lot of fuel damage, right? So he knows that the steward is probably delayed by a lot.
Our opponents are seizing a sector. The enemy has driven a wedge in our lines. We have been granted access.
Just some fighting over here. You'll notice that he's doing also some early retreats. Just as you see here, he knows that that lieutenant would have shredded his squad, but even if it wasn't that situation with the lieutenant especially, you'll often see that OSTHEER players, when they want to get the 2-2 out, they'll start early retreating a lot of the squads, because they need that manpower to get the 2-2 out as soon as possible without losing much map control. And that means not bleeding manpower in the minutes or seconds leading up to that. So you'll notice that he did a lot of early retreats here, so he can get that 2-2 out as fast as possible. And this is usually when OSTHEER loses a lot of map control, and where the USF player can get some map back. But because CN actually played the early stages so well, you'll notice that he doesn't lose much map control in the process of getting the 2-2. And we see that THEODOSIUS actually went for the M20 as a choice. And if you are playing OSTHEER, you very much like this choice because the 2-2 can more than handle the M20. That's usually kind of a sign that the USF player was starved for fuel, and CN knows this, so that's free information that the USF player gave him, is that he's struggling with fuel,
To an emergency medical station.
and that he probably doesn't need a pack gun anytime soon.
Pioneers ready for assignment.
Another early retreat, he doesn't want to bleed manpower out. If you know that you are going to have your med bunker up, then you can start early retreating your units to avoid free manpower damage, right? So he built the bunker, he knew that was up, so no point in leaving the grenadier in the field any longer. You can just get that back to full HP. You also notice that CN did a second Pioneer squad. You will notice this in a lot of high level play. If he upgraded the flamethrower in one of the squads, then he did another Pioneer squad to kinda sweep the mines anyway. Especially because he's up against an M20, and you know that the USF player is going to try to place some of those mines down. Okay, here we see again, as soon as he has the opportunity to go for the cutoff, he will. This is what I mentioned with any bit of an advantage that you see CN getting, he straight up goes for the cutoff. So if he retreats like 1 or 2 rifleman squad, he immediately takes advantage of that. And here we see CN just trying to see where his opponent might be going. And because he doesn't see anything here, there's a very good bet that he's going for the right side or splitting his forces. And you can see something actually very smart here. It's that he knows that in this side there are no 2-2 counters, so he keeps the 2-2 on this side, and it's going to be enough to make these two squads retreat because THEODOSIUS has no 2-2 counter here, right? His only counter are the bazookas, and that's on the right side. So all CN needs to do is keep his light vehicle in the side of the map that has no counters, and this is something that actually I see also many mid-level players missing, is that they don't use their light vehicles to their fullest potential because they don't go to the side that has no counters. If your opponent is struggling to get a counter out your light vehicle, usually when they do get one counter, it's only like one unit, say one AT gun, one squad with bazookas, one light vehicle such as a Stewart, right? If you keep your light vehicle on the side that's uncountered, then your opponent has a much harder time to keep your vehicle under control, right? And this is what CN is doing here. And he early retreats on this side of the map because he knows that's free manpower damage that he'll receive if he stays there. Okay, so 2-2 comes now to the right side now that he's dealt with the left side. His only concern is going to be the bazookas, really. You'll notice that where a mid-level player would have defaulted to build a pack gun, like I said, CN knows that he did meaningful fuel damage to his opponent early on. He also knows that he built the M20, so that's even less fuel, and he now knows that he built a mortar as well on top of that. So he can be fairly certain that the Stewart isn't coming out, and even if it did, because of how strong Grenadiers with FOSS are, he could be fairly certain that he could stall for a pack gun if he needed to. But he's also certain that he's probably not going to go for a Stewart after the M20, because with all the fuel damage that he did on THEODOSIUS, if THEODOSIUS did go for a Stewart, he knows that the Major would be delayed by a lot. So it wouldn't be very smart of him. And this is where kind of OSTHEER starts to dominate a lot, especially on a more open map like this. The LMGs on the Grenadiers start just shredding at the Rifleman.
Territory is out of contact.
And just some fighting here. And now we have the tier 3 with the P4 building up for CN with that early advantage that he had. Now this is like a very commanding lead because it's very hard for USF to get a counter to the P4 when they are behind. You'll also notice that he's building a pack gun. I wouldn't say that it's really needed, but he's playing on the safe side. And from here on out, it's very hard for the USF player to do anything because of that early lead and mid-game lead that he had. It's just going to snowball into a victory, right? So there is no reason to see any further because USF player here is in a really bad situation now where this P4 is basically encountered for basically the rest of the game, right? So some things to learn here and that I feel like mid-level players don't do and CN did here is that he adapts very well to where the opponent is going. So he knows that if he pushed THEODOSIUS from the right side off, it's likely that he's now going to the left side, for example. So yeah, you'll see that this 2-2 movement and this MG movement in general tries to mimic where the opponent might be going. And that's something that high-level players do really well. Also, you'll notice that as soon as he saw one of the riflemen retreat, he instantly went for the cutoff, and those cutoff maneuvers are really deadly. Many of the players don't know just how deadly they are. That can delay your light vehicle by 30 seconds to 1 minute. And that's more than enough in that 30 seconds to 1 minute to give the window of opportunity that it needs to just dominate the field and snowball even further advantages, right? Another thing that you might have noticed is that CN doesn't miss his timings. The 2-2 came to the field as soon as it could, and that's another thing that mid-level to low-level players miss a lot, is that they don't get the timing windows right. They kind of forget about getting the light vehicle as soon as possible, for example. And usually that's like 30 seconds to 1 minute that you are losing because your light vehicle could have come in sooner when there was no counter. That's like free map control, free manpower damage to your opponent. Another thing that you notice is that he knows the damage that he did. He saw the M13 coming out, and he adapted his build a bit where he didn't build a pack-gun, which should have been a completely useless unit against what USF had, and could have. In many situations it actually does happen, that's like a trigger for the USF player to come back, because he just wasted almost 300 manpower on a unit that's going to be useless for the next 10 to 15 minutes of the game. So CN knew that no real threat was coming and the pack wasn't needed. Another thing that you'll notice is that he didn't leave any HARASS territory, right? He didn't focus just on one side and left a free side to the USF player. He kept harassing both sides. Also, that's something that you don't see until you get to the high tier of play. You'll notice that many players usually leave free territories for their opponent and they just focus on like this World War I kind of style of gameplay in one side of the map, right? Another thing that you might have also noticed is that he didn't leave any low health units in the field, and he didn't take any bad engagement, so his manpower was always very good. He didn't take any unnecessary losses. If you have low health squads in the field, or you see an engagement that you're going to lose for sure, like that lieutenant one, then you can see high level players instantly retreating and avoiding to take those casualties. Yeah, I think that's all for this OSTHEER part of the game. We'll now go into his Soviet play. Okay, here we are now with CN playing as Soviets. It's going to be very interesting to see what he does as well. Right from the get-go, you see that he has a second engineer lined up and a conscript squad, so no tier 1, and I actually would advise against going tier 1. Going tier 1 as Soviets overall. The second engineer is really useful because it comes in earlier than the conscript squad, so you can capture more of the map early on, and it's also a second unit to lay down some mines and eventually maybe get a flamethrower. And that's really annoying to play against when you are playing against double engineer and they are just spamming mines around the map. So that's something that CN is doing right off the bat. The weakness of going a second engineer is that you are missing obviously one extra conscript squad at some point in the game. And if the OSTHEER player pushes you off the map, then you don't have the units to fight back. And I'm just going to pause right here because his capping order is already kind of interesting, and you can see just how important scouting is. He sends his first conscript squad to the mid of the map, and that's a really important part of the early game, is that he's not only scouting with his conscript squad, the squad is also in a very good position to rotate to either the left or the right, depending on where he sees the MG, so he might get the flank straight away. And his engineers are just going to cap the map. Another thing that you'll notice is because he went for an opening of 2 engineers, these first 2 conscript squads are going to be together, and his hope here is that he gets the Grenadier squad of THEODOSIUS alone, so that his early build order doesn't get punished, right? So if he gets like the Grenadier alone here, which is very possible, then him having built the engineer instead of the conscript squad early on is not going to matter, because THEODOSIUS is going to have the Grenadier back at base anyway, in the early stages of the game, that is. And he also knows that he doesn't see any unit right here, right? So he's fairly certain that the MG and the Grenadier that THEODOSIUS first sent went to the right side. That's almost a guarantee. At this point, it's 100% guarantee that the MG and the Grenadier, he knows that it's on this side. And usually, you don't leave free and capped territories, so he knows that THEODOSIUS is going to send one of these extra units to this side of the map to start capping. So that's why he's doing this. He's hoping to get that Grenadier. And here it is, the Grenadier, as expected, comes to this side. And he gets free manpower damage on that Grenadier. Although THEODOSIUS reacts well, and his MG is already going to the left side. But you'll notice how, even though this might have seemed like a small thing, Company of Heroes is a lot about early engagements, and this was kind of a masterful first minute of the game, right? He had 2 conscript squads here. He made THEODOSIUS react to that, so THEODOSIUS brought the MG back to the left plus the Grenadier squad, and that left the Pioneer that he had alone here, so he had to get that back because he was going to lose the engagement over here. And both the full health conscript squad went around and he stalled in this building for the flamethrower, and when he had that flamethrower, he also knew where the MG was. And this squad that came from the right is now going to be supported by the conscript squad that soft retreated through here and joined up with the flamethrower squad, right? And THEODOSIUS is kind of split up because he knows that he's falling behind in map control because of this maneuver here, so he feels the need to capture. And at the same time, that's when CN is now applying the pressure when he noticed that the Grenadier squad split up from the main army to capture points. So this is very well read from CN. He knows that when THEODOSIUS split up from the rest of the army to capture some map, it's when he can full on engage at MG. And you also notice that he goes straight away to cap and decap a lot of points in the map. He also sees the Pigren here, so he knows that tier 2 is up. Also heals, fairly default decking.
Additional resources are now available to you, Commander. We may now deploy heavy machine guns, comrade.
Right now, you'll notice that, as most cases, the strategy here is to stall a bit for the T-70, because OSTHEER starts getting the upper hand at this point in the game without the T-70. So he's just making a bit of time there. He also sees the 222 on the left side of the map. And here it is. You also notice that the T-70 is always moving, right? CN is very good at using the full potential of his light vehicles, as you noticed in the previous game with the 222. This T-70 is always on the move and looking for new targets. And on this side of the map, he knows that the Pigran is a Pigran squad, he doesn't have any Fosts. So he straight away goes to this side of the map and he finds the MG as well. So 3 damage there, and the Pioneer squad also has no counter. And now he will look for the Pigran squad.
Any structure or vehicle can now be repaired.
Right now he knows that he has the upper hand. He hasn't seen the pack gun yet. So he knows that he has no counter there. Again, just constantly moving in between sides. He knows that the only way for that T-70 to be countered is by a pack gun. And I'm not sure if he saw the pack gun yet. Either way, if he did, he knows that it's on the right side. So the left side is one side that THEODOSIUS just can't harass until he gets a good grasp of the center. THEODOSIUS' objective here would be to play to the right and mid part of the map, because if he frees up the middle of the map, he frees up the pack movement. So the pack can position himself up in the center and he can follow the T-70 around the map very well. But if you don't have the center controlled as OSTHEER, it's very hard for your pack gun to follow the T-70 to the center of the map, into the left part of the map, obviously. So that's something that THEODOSIUS probably has in his mind, is that he needs this center part of the map and this right part of the map. And that's something CN knows that he has. So he knows that as long as he has the center, he also has the left part of the map right here. Okay, and he sees the pack gun now. THEODOSIUS did a mortar to win back the center of the map. It was a very decent choice. And you'll notice that THEODOSIUS as well, as soon as he gets the opportunity, he goes for the cutoffs. So they don't leave any unharassed territories anywhere. If they can, they harass them. Okay, just the T-70 being super annoying here. But you can see that THEODOSIUS is doing a very good job on seeing where the T-70 is and kind of avoiding the T-70 and going for the left part of the map. And you'll often see that mid-level players don't quite do this. They stick to one side of the map and just leave the other side completely unharassed, so they don't swap sides. And THEODOSIUS, even though he's on the back foot technically with the T-70, he has no super good counter. He still has a very good map control.
Enemy forces are attempting to capture our territory.
Okay, now CN does a Zizgan, which as Soviets is also kind of an MG counter because of the barrage, so it's always a very good choice. Okay, just looking for the mortar. So the Zizgan is barraging the MG, I assume. And now we have the M4C Sherman out. A very strong tank, especially against OSTHEER.
Capturing supply sector.
We also have a P4 out for the OSTHEER player. You'll see straight away that he recognizes that this is a free P4 right here. This is the thing with M4C Shermans, or if you have smoke in general, even if you don't here, it's good to recognize when you have a very good push opportunity. Because what you also see in mid-level games is that they usually extend for a long time when they get to the mid-late games many times. And that's because they don't really punish or see the windows of opportunity to go for these kinds of pushes, right? And here, if CN trades this M4C for a P4, even if he trades those, it's going to be beneficial for him. So don't get too attached to your units if you know that you can make a 1-for-1 trade when you are ahead. You'll notice that CN knows that he has a lot of fuel, so he knows that another M4C Sherman might be coming soon, and he also knows that he has been harassing quite well the fuel of THEODOSIUS. So he knows that even if this push goes for a 1-for-1 trade, which is unlikely at this point because the P4 is so low, but even if it did, it would be beneficial for CN. This is something that you noticed. I often see mid-level players floating resources and just trying to keep their vehicles alive, maybe to keep like a vet one on one of their vehicles. It's not worth it, guys. What it's worth is if you are ahead, you want to trade at minimum like 1-for-1 so that you can reestablish your army with the resources that you have, but your opponent can't. It doesn't have the resources. And after you do that, even if you lose your tank, you're going to be up 1 tank because you have the resources to rebuild it, and he doesn't. And CN knows that. He did some free damage on that before, and he went straight away with the M4C Sherman. No fear here. Even if he loses this M4C Sherman, which he did actually. So he lost the M4C Sherman, which honestly was quite unlucky. But the repercussions of that is that he knows that he can build another M4C Sherman, so it's not like he lost the game because of that. But now the OSTHEER guy, he has to repair the P4 for a long time, so it's out of commission for a long time. And because of that pressure that CN did with the push, he now has the map back completely, and it's really hard usually to come back out from your base and get that back as easily. So he's going to lose a lot of time recapturing the map because of that one push, even if it didn't kill the P4. It was still a very good push. Okay, loses one engineer there.
Infantry squad. The enemy is encroaching on our territory. We need to re-establish our supply lines.
And the other M4C is out, so
The enemy has taken our supply sector.
he's still in a very good position.
Engineers ready for assignment.
Again, harassing the left, he doesn't leave anything free for THEODOSIUS.
We are losing supplies to the enemy.
Always keeping that MG under control with some good flanks. And the Zizgan barraging as well.
We are losing territory. Our territory is falling into enemy hands.
In these kind of mid-centric maps, you'll notice that a lot of times, and you are noticing it here, it's very important to control the center after you control one of the sides. So you'll often see that the plan on many maps like this one is to control one side of the map, so you will have the fuel income coming in, and then you transition to the center. The center is a very important part of the map, because who controls the center is basically who has the best AT-Guns position. AT-Guns benefit a lot of having this mid position, because they can follow the tanks around, and usually the tanks, if they are on the left side, say right here, it's very easy for the AT-Guns to push a little bit further and get some shots in. It's also very easy to access the cutoff if the opponent decides to defend the left a bit too much. So that's why it's really important, and THEODOSIUS kind of panicked here a bit and used the ability so he couldn't push through the center. And just now 2 M4Cs Sherman, just regaining the center again. You'll now see that because he has 2 M4C Shermans, he keeps one in the center and one on the left, because THEODOSIUS can only effectively counter one of them at a time. There's also another dynamic here, is that whoever has the superior vehicle army, so in this case 2 M4Cs to 1 P4, is also the one that is much more mobile in the field. So if you have more tanks, you can deflect these kinds of attempts on the sides of the map a lot easier, because the P4 on its own won't fight 2 M4C Shermans. He needs the pack gun behind, and the pack gun takes a lot of time to transition through the map, especially if you don't have control of the center. Because of that, CN feels comfortable with keeping a lot of the right part of the map while keeping pressure on the left. So whenever you have the superior tank army, you can most of the time focus on, for example here, the left side of the map, and then keep the AT-Guns here, and as soon as you see some kind of harassment from your opponent on the other side of the map, you can easily transition 1 or 2 tanks there and push him off and keep the harassment on this side of the map. And that means that you'll most of the time have like 75% of the map, and the 25% of the map that your opponent has is not safe at all, because it's constantly under pressure. Okay, so here it was a bad push in this case, but either way he knows that the VPs are counting down. Very bad push here, he gets Faustin. That's going to be either way game over just because of the VP count. Either way, what would you guys do here if you were in this situation? Because I feel like a lot of players would crumble in this position, but I do know that CN ends up winning this game. And if you are in this situation where you just lost 2 vehicles because you played bad, you need to kind of think of what your concerns are and what your objectives are. He's up against the Tiger here, so he got the P4 down. So he recognizes that that's the main unit that THEODOSIUS is relying on to win the game. And M4Cs aren't going to cut it, so I would imagine that he's going to rebuild the Cis guns here. So his objective is probably like 2 Cis guns and 2 M4C Shermans to gain back the game. We'll see what he does though. Always try to recognize what's giving you trouble. Even though that THEODOSIUS is kind of giving him back the map for some reason. Okay, he decides to go for the Su-85, that's also basically a replacement for the AT-Gun, right? It's like a mobile AT-Gun in a way. And Tiger down, got good from THEODOSIUS. I think the game is kind of over with that Tiger down, yeah, definitely. So that last moment there, I think it's somewhat interesting to look at. Sometimes it's very beneficial for you to pause the game when it gets in a tough position and think what you would do here and then see what CN does. So he does recognize that that Tiger is a problem, and if he wants to finish up the game, he needs some kind of counter. And he decides to go for the SU-85, which is a very decent choice here. The only reason I said this gun instead of the SU-85 is that sometimes you want to have the AT gun instead of the SU-85 because the AT gun doesn't waste any fuel. And because of that, you can then build a second M4C Sherman. But either way, it worked out, the SU-85. It wasn't a bad choice by any means, just different playstyles, I suppose. But it's very good to see that he adapted to what he had in that situation, right? That's something that mid-level players need to kind of learn to do. Don't stick to the same build order. Sometimes you have to pause yourself mid-game and think, what do I need to do now to finish up the game? And if you're recognizing that you are having trouble dealing with the infantry, you're having trouble dealing with the P4s or any kind of vehicle that he has, then you kind of need to do to think what's going to best counter that. Anyways, what he noticed in this game was that the early game from CN and the mid game was very clean. You notice that he scouted his opponent very well, and he caught off guard the MG many times and some grenadiers as well. And this T-70 play again was very good because he kept the T-70 going around the map where there weren't any counters, and he also recognized that the center was a very good part of the map to control to enable T-70 to be even more annoying. So that's something to take off from this game as well. You'll also notice that both THEODOSIUS and CN, and this is a mark of high-tier play, even when they were on the back foot, they didn't leave any harass territories. So CN was struggling on the right, and you saw him harass the left, always keeping CN having to have a unit there, because as soon as you stop harassing the free side of the map that they have, they feel comfortable bringing their whole army to the part of the map that you are on, and that means that you are basically playing a losing battle because you aren't harassing his free side, you're just fighting for your own side. He's being the aggressor. So whenever you can, don't leave any free harass territories that your opponent might have. My rule of thumb is, at least of your whole army, leave one unit to do that kind of job. Okay guys, so that's going to be it for me. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.